I don't like this at all. I really, really, really don't like this at all. I try to keep as positive possible when it comes to my content, but this is something that sort of does scare me as a fan of anime. Yes, Reuters has reported that Sony Group Corporation is in talks to acquire Kadokawa Corporation. That is massive, by the way. For those that don't know, Kadokawa is huge, not just in anime. It's huge in manga. It's huge in light novel. It's a publishing company. It's an anime production company. This is massive. We're talking like a big chunk of the entertainment industry in Japan. Sony is about to buy it. Now, this is still in talks and we have sources. This is not a confirmation yet, but there's something here that kind of tips the hand a little bit much. They said that Sony Group Corporation is in talks to acquire Kadokawa Corporation, according to Reuters report, citing two sources familiar with the matter. Talks between the two sides are reportedly ongoing, and a deal could be signed in the coming weeks, if successful, the sources said. Now, Sony Group Corporation declined to comment when asked by Reuters. Kadokawa Corporation said it could not comment. That's sort of a sign right there that something is happening. We're not going to comment on it, which means they're not saying, no. Now, granted, there's always talks between companies about buyouts. There's constantly times where they're asking how much they're worth, they're looking to buy, they're kind of poking their nose in. It could be simply the idea that Sony contacted Kadokawa and said, hey, how much? And Kadokawa was like, not happening, too much. Like, if you have to ask, you don't have enough. Now, again, this could just be talks. But again, they're citing the idea that they're in talks and the idea that it could be signed within a couple weeks. Within weeks. That tells me that something's happening here. I want to hope and pray that this is just them prodding and nothing's actually going to happen. Because I think the ramifications for this is way too devastating. I don't like this. Again, I like to keep my content positive. I even like to kind of give a little bit here in the idea that even if this does happen, I want to hope that, again, this is Sony Group Corporation. This is Sony Japan, where this is all origined at. Their big corporation, their main head is in Japan. And their Japan heads know that anime is a good thing, and they want to keep it as anime. But they're also of the mindset of global. Their mindset is global, 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 global. Not as much as Kadokawa. Kadokawa is still kind of rooted in Japan, whereas Sony thinks global. How can we get this to as many eyeballs as possible and get as much cash flow as possible coming in? And yes, that typically means that they bend a little bit to the global scale. Now, I don't think to the levels of something like PlayStation. I think PlayStation was a massive mistake for Sony. Now, I think it was a success for Sony because, honestly, they wanted to have a more Western audience because it was doing better in the West. And so they gave it up to some people in California, and they turned it into what it was, which is just basically an American console. And the problem here is that we want anime to remain a Japanese medium that we consume that is very Japanese. So the fear is, as Sony gets bigger and bigger and focuses so much on a global scale because they're making so much money with Crunchyroll and streaming everywhere, that they're going to start changing things that are under their branch. And like I said before, Kadokawa is a massive company with a massive amount of properties underneath their wings. I mean, looking at the Wikipedia page here, just going down here, let's look. We're talking about Bookwalker. We're talking about Comic Walker. We're talking about all these publishing brands that are all underneath them. Lots of really big titles. I think even Sword Art Online, if I remember correctly, is a Kadokawa property. Then we look over here. Dogakobo Studio. That is Kadokawa. We have over here, we have ENGI. That's a Kadokawa studio. There's a lot of stuff here that are all entrenched in the idea of publishing, brands, and all this kind of stuff. Looking into, let's look at Mao under Kadokawa. These are all things that they've actually produced. Now, it doesn't mean they're full 100% ownership of all these properties, but these are everything that they're actually producing. We're talking about a bunch of properties. Just this season alone, Demon Lord 2099. We have Damsel Do Over, Kamanohashi. We have Sword Art Online again. Sword Art Online. We have ReZero. We have the girls that could not become magicians. Trillion Game, Negaposi, the villainous go down in history. Before that, the movie of Overlord. The previous season, tons of titles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I think was that season 2, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, I think was, we're talking about like 13 or 14 properties. They produce a lot of stuff. And again, not full ownerships and not full production of all this stuff in a lot of cases, but I would imagine that most of these things, they're probably majority owners of all these properties. Kadokawa is massive. We're talking about a big buy here. And again, I don't want to be doom and gloom. I want to hope that Sony Group Corporation doesn't mess this up. But this does kind of position Sony once again as being sort of in a position of pretty much a monopoly at this point. Put aside something like big like Shueisha or something like that, which is probably only a matter of time at this point because they're currently in partnership with Shueisha through this whole Joan thing. I don't think that would take some really big pockets to buy somebody like Shueisha. Shueisha is massive, but it's only a matter of time. But this is sort of positioning them in a point where they can take full control of the anime industry. Not that they have it quite yet, but they're getting there. I mean, I've talked several times on the podcast with my brother about the idea of hoping that one day all these other companies like Kadokawa, like Shueisha, all these different companies that are publishing or are producing different anime to get in a position where they can provide their content themselves. And yes, a lot of it has to do with utilizing AI and translations and whatnot to be able to distribute themselves. We're at a point now where I'm hoping they get to that stuff really quick because Sony is getting too much. They're getting their hands too much in it. We're going to probably get to a point here soon where Sony themselves is going to be basically, if it's anime, it's Sony. If you want anime, it's Sony. Oh, what's Sony releasing next for anime? Oh, let's see. Let's look at Sony chart to find out what is the next season of Sony anime coming out. Again, I'm getting too far. Calm down, Andrew. There is one thing that I will probably say just to kind of give people a little bit of a calming of the heart. There's one positive thing that might actually come out of all this whole situation. I'm just mostly joking here, but Kadokawa technically does own Anime News Network. So if you're a person that doesn't like Anime News Network, well, I guess we can figure that probably the same thing will happen to ANN that happened to Right Stuff, where Crunchyroll, Sony buys a company that does something in the West and goes, oh, we're going to merge Anime News Network into Crunchyroll News. So goodbye, Anime News Network. I hope you guys enjoyed your website. It's probably going away here soon because Sony's probably going to delete it. I immediately thought of that when I seen that, yeah, even Anime News Network posted on this and even put in their little blurb at the bottom that they are, yes, technically owned by Kadokawa. I'm like, yeah, you might be wanting to put your job offerings or look for job offerings out there here real soon, because if this goes through, you're probably going to get deleted because Sony's not going to have 2 news sites in the West. I'm sorry. And even though I don't think that Crunchyroll News is the greatest news source ever, it's going to happen because Right Stuff was amazing, way more amazing than Crunchyroll Store, but they decided to delete that whole website, and now we're stuck with just Crunchyroll Store. So pretty soon it's just going to be Crunchyroll News here soon. Again, I don't like this. I really don't. I do, again, like to give I like to get Crunchyroll, Sony Roll, the benefit of the doubt. I think that they have done a lot of great things for anime. I think Aniplex themselves, the anime that they have actually produced, are really incredible. Even if people want to believe that Sony themselves is censoring anime and that we'll never get anything good, if you just look at with Aniplex right here, looking at the stuff that they're actually offering, they still offer a lot of stuff that has explicit stuff in it, has lots of violence, has lots of shoot. Dandadan itself is just not holding back. There's no filters in that show. Makane was extremely lewd in a lot of cases. Monogatari series is extremely lewd in a lot of cases. They have that entire series. It's not as if I'm saying that Sony themselves is a bad company. I think that they still produce a lot of stuff that is very Japan and does not kind of cater to the West and sensitivities. But we're at a point now where it could eventually pivot to the idea that now that we have control and our focus starts to shift more and more to a global audience, that's when the censorship starts to happen. And it's not necessarily just for the United States and all the sensibilities that are kind of coming up in the social discussions, but more so in the idea of getting to a lot of countries where violence isn't allowed, any kind of nudity or explicit content's allowed. China. They want to get into China, so they're going to start to censor things a lot more to fit to China. That's a big one there as well. If you think that the United States is sensitive, there's a lot of countries that are extremely more sensitive than just the United States. And that's where my fears come. My only hope right now, at least from a vantage point from my own country, United States, is just that it feels like the discussion around censorship and whatnot starting to pivot quite a bit. It's becoming less acceptable for companies to try to cater to sensibilities. And so that might actually have a positive effect here. But again, my concern's more for countries like, China and whatnot that are going to be a lot more sensitive to stuff that they might want to get into. Sony, please, if you're listening to this, don't botch it. Don't botch it. But anyways, this kind of hit me out of nowhere, and I'm not looking forward to this. This is a big move by Sony, and it is going to change. It is going to change a lot of stuff, and I'm not liking it. Like I've said before, I don't like the idea of a monopoly. When you have one company owning too many things, they make too many decisions for the industry as a whole, and the idea of anybody trying to rise up and try to compete gets squashed out. I really do hope that just somebody else to compete with Sony and give us other options other than just Sony, and not giving them a free rein to do whatever decisions they want to do. We'll see, though. I know that a lot of people are excited about this whole thing because FromSoft is with Kadokawa as well. I know there's a lot of big titles that Sony PlayStation themselves can utilize here, but honestly, I think most people are reporting the wrong thing here. It is nothing. This buyout has nothing to do with From Software. I am sorry. That's a big title. That's a big studio, but this company is huge. We're not talking about just let's be honest, a very small gaming studio here. We're talking about Kadokawa Publishing, a massive, massive staple in the anime industry. So we'll see where it goes. Let me know down in the comments down below. Do you think this is overblown? Do you think that that this is just two sources? This is a trust me, bro. Don't worry. This is not going to be the case. They're never going to buy them. Do you think that hopefully Kadokawa just says, too many zeros and Sony backs off? I hope that Kadokawa says too many zeros. Just say too many zeros. Just throw an insane number out there. Let me know. But if you're new here, make sure to subscribe if you leave, like this content, you want to support the channel more. I have links in the description below. Greatly appreciate what it does. Y'all take care.